Have you ever heard of a ghost so deeply in love with a woman that it would stop at nothing to possess her, even if it meant bringing unspeakable horror into her life? Brace yourself for a journey into the unknown, where love and terror intertwine in ways you've never imagined. Stay with us till the end, if you dare. Emma had always been drawn to old houses, especially those that seemed to hold secrets within their walls. So, when she inherited an old Victorian mansion from a distant relative she barely remembered, she couldn't resist moving in. The house, located on the outskirts of a small, foggy town, had a reputation among the locals. Whispers of hauntings and ghostly sightings surrounded it, but Emma was a skeptic. To her, the house was a beautiful, historical piece of architecture that needed love and restoration. From the moment Emma stepped inside, she felt an eerie presence. The air was thick with the scent of old wood and dampness. The floors creaked with every step, and shadows seemed to move just out of sight. She brushed off the unsettling feeling and focused on making the house her own. One evening, as Emma was unpacking boxes in the living room, she noticed a chill in the air. The temperature had dropped suddenly, and she could see her breath in front of her. As she turned to find a blanket, she saw him for the first time. A shadowy figure stood at the edge of the room watching her. She blinked, and he was gone. Emma's heart pounded in her chest. She convinced herself it was just her imagination. But that night, as she lay in bed, she felt a weight on the mattress, as if someone had sat down beside her. She couldn't move, couldn't breathe. A cold hand brushed her cheek and a voice whispered her name. "Emma." The voice was soft, almost tender, but it filled her with a primal fear. She wanted to scream, but no sound came out. After what felt like an eternity, the presence lifted and she could move again. She turned on the light, her heart racing. The room was empty. Determined to uncover the truth, Emma delved into the history of the house. She discovered that a century ago, a young man named Thomas had lived there. Thomas had fallen deeply in love with a woman named Eliza, but their love was doomed from the start. Eliza was promised to another man, and when Thomas found out, he was devastated. One stormy night, Eliza was found dead under mysterious circumstances. Thomas, heartbroken and vengeful, took his own life, cursing that he would never leave the house and would make anyone who lived there pay for his suffering. Emma felt a pang of sadness for Thomas, but also a growing fear. Was his spirit still lingering, bound by his tragic love? Over the next few weeks, the hauntings became more frequent. Emma would hear Thomas's voice whispering her name, feel his touch, and see his shadow. But there was something different now. The ghost seemed less vengeful and more yearning. He was drawn to Emma, and she could feel his intense emotions. One night, Emma dreamt of Thomas. He appeared as a handsome young man with sorrowful eyes. In the dream, he reached out to her, and she took his hand. His touch was cold, but his gaze was warm, filled with a desperate longing. She woke up with tears in her eyes, feeling a strange connection to him. The connection between Emma and Thomas grew stronger. She felt his presence constantly, and he began to appear in her dreams more frequently. She found herself drawn to him, despite the fear and the horror. But Thomas's love was all-consuming. He didn't want to share her with anyone, not even in the world of the living. One night, as Emma slept, she felt a cold hand wrap around her wrist. She couldn't move, couldn't scream. Thomas's voice filled her mind, pleading, begging her to stay with him forever. She felt a force pulling her, as if he was trying to drag her into the spirit world. She fought with all her strength, but the pull was relentless. With a final surge of willpower, Emma broke free. She woke up gasping for breath, her heart pounding. The room was icy cold, and she knew Thomas was there, watching her. His love had turned into a dangerous obsession. Desperate to rid herself of Thomas's ghost, Emma sought the help of a local paranormal expert, Mrs. Whitmore. The old woman listened to Emma's story with grave concern and agreed to help. She explained that they needed to perform a ritual to sever the connection between Emma and Thomas. On the night of the ritual, the house seemed to come alive with malevolent energy. The wind howled outside, and the air was thick with tension. Mrs. Whitmore set up candles and protective charms around the room. She began to chant in a language Emma didn't understand, calling on spirits to aid them. Thomas's presence became palpable. The temperature dropped, and the shadows in the room deepened. Emma felt a cold hand on her shoulder, and she knew Thomas was trying to stop the ritual. Mrs. Whitmore's chanting grew louder, more urgent. Suddenly, a force slammed into Emma, knocking her to the ground. She looked up to see Thomas's ghost, his face twisted in anguish. He reached out to her, his eyes pleading. "Emma, don't leave me, please." Emma felt a wave of sorrow for him, but she knew she had to break free. She reached for the candle and blew it out. There was a blinding flash of light, and then silence. When Emma woke up, the house was quiet. The oppressive presence was gone. Mrs. Whitmore helped her to her feet, looking exhausted but relieved. "It's over," she said. "Thomas is gone." Emma felt a mix of relief and sadness. She knew Thomas had loved her in his own twisted way, but his love had become a dangerous obsession. She couldn't live her life under the shadow of a vengeful spirit. But as the days passed, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that Thomas was still watching over her. She would catch glimpses of a shadow out of the corner of her eye, or feel a cold breeze brush past her. She knew he was still there, somewhere, bound by his tragic love. One evening, Emma decided to confront Thomas one last time. She went to the old attic where he had spent his final days and called out to him. "Thomas, if you're still here, please listen to me. I understand your pain, your love, but you need to let go. We both need to move on." For a moment, there was silence. Then, she felt a cold breeze and Thomas's ghost appeared before her. His face was no longer twisted with anger but filled with sorrow. "I loved you, Emma," he whispered, "but I understand. Goodbye." With those words, he vanished. The air seemed to lighten, and Emma felt a weight lift from her shoulders. She knew Thomas had finally found peace. Emma continued to live in the house, but the haunting ceased. She restored the mansion, turning it into a beautiful home filled with light and warmth. She often thought of Thomas and the love that had bound him to the house. His story was a tragic one, but in the end, he had found peace. Emma's life returned to normal, but she never forgot the ghost who had loved her. She would sometimes light a candle for him, a small gesture of remembrance. She knew that love, even when twisted and haunted, had the power to linger long after death. If this story of a ghost's all-consuming love and the haunting that followed gripped you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more chilling tales. Hit the bell icon to stay updated with our latest uploads. And remember, sometimes love can be the scariest thing of all.